guys, today I'm going to be telling you all about my labor and delivery of baby Micah. I want to make this video because I do like to watch them and they're able to go a little bit more in depth than the birth vlogs, because I did show a lot in the birth vlog, but there's also a lot that I left out and chose not to show or just didn't mention in the vlog because it was just too much to go into, and I decided that I would just go more in depth about it in my labor and delivery story. So if I'm looking down, I have a notebook down here with like everything listed out as much as I can remember and from my birth vlog of how things went, and the times might be a little mixed up, things might be a little tiny bit mixed up, but for the most part this is how it went. And I don't remember all of it because as long as it happened very quickly, and I was kind of out of it at times and I wasn't really sure what was happening, and at certain times I wasn't really sure what was going on, and but this is the story of how my son was born. He was born on June 22nd, 2017 on a Thursday, and I went into the hospital for an induction, and I was being induced due to suspected IUGR, which is intrauterine growth restriction, which basically means that the baby isn't growing anymore, which was a lie because it wasn't a lie. I mean, the doctors can only be so correct with these things, but he was 5 pounds for the longest, and then he slowly started creeping to 6 pounds, and then the next week they told me he was 7 pounds, and I was like, no way he went to 7 pounds in 1 week, because he should only be gaining half a pound a week if he was gaining how he should have been, but he wasn't gaining like at all. He was only gaining like a couple ounces every couple weeks towards the end. And then when I went for my very last ultrasound, they also said that he was like 7 pounds, and he came out closer to 8 pounds than 7 pounds. So they were just off all around, but that's why I was induced. They called me at 5 a.m. that morning to go into the hospital. I couldn't eat or drink past 12 a.m. I had to shower the night before and shower the morning of with the special soap they gave me. I'm not so sure why. I guess the procedures are just kind of like a C-section, because the procedures for the induction and C-section are kind of similar with the prep that you have to do, such as not eating. And then I couldn't wear any jewelry, so I had to take off my rings. I do have this industrial piercing in my ear that I couldn't take off, but no one told me anything unless they just didn't see it. And I went in, they called me at 5 to go in at 7. So I went in at 7 and I got called back there about 7:15 a.m. and Gio and my grandma went with me, and they stayed in the waiting room while I went back there, and I got dressed in my gown, and I put my clothes away, and she got an IV started in my hand, and IV kind of felt like, at first it kind of felt like ice going up my arm. It kind of felt cool and refreshing in a way, but then you get used to it. And she gave me an enema, which is basically they make you poop and to empty your bowels so you're less likely to go on the table while you're giving birth, because that can happen. The few days before, I did lose my mucus plug. I lost my mucus plug the day before and a couple days before that, and then I think I had like tiny bits also. But the 2 times I lost my mucus plug, I lost like a pretty big amount, and there was blood in it. It wasn't like fresh blood, it wasn't like really bright, it was darker blood, but there was blood in it. So that made me hopeful that my cervix was changing, because when you lose your mucus plug, it means your cervix is changing. And I was hoping that it would be, it would react well to the medication they would give me. I was also 1 centimeter dilated when I went in there. I was 1 centimeter for weeks now, and she told me I was 1 centimeter with some wiggle room. I also met my nurse, of course. She was really nice, super friendly. I forgot her name. Her name was really different, but I loved her. But I didn't have the same nurse when I was actually giving birth because her shift was up and she just kind of disappeared. So one of the first things that she did after she got my IV started and such, she made me sit up, what she called princess style. The hospital beds can go in a bunch of different positions, and she set it up like a chair. So I was like straight up, and the bottom of the bed was like this, so my legs could go straight and down, and I had to sit kind of crisscross with my legs crossed, and I sat like that for 1 hour so it could help the baby to drop. And she did that, and then after that was done, she laid me back down and she put me on the peanut ball, which kind of looks like the birthing ball or the yoga ball, but it's like misshapen like a peanut. And I laid on one side with it between my legs. I forgot what it was exactly. I think it was to open the cervix or to open my hips and help the baby go down. I'm not really sure exactly why they do it. If you know, leave it down below. She did tell me, but it's basically to help the baby come out. And I did that for quite a while. I would lay on one side, then the other, then the other, then the other, and I'm not sure how many times I did that, but I laid on the peanut ball back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, I think 30 minutes at a time, and then she'd come back in and switch me. They started the Pitocin, which is a drug to help cause contractions, at about 8 to 9 a.m. I'm not sure exactly, but they did start it not too long after I'd gotten there, and it causes contractions. And when they put the monitor on me to see how the baby was doing, I was actually already having contractions. I just wasn't aware. I couldn't feel them or anything, and so they started that. They didn't do any Cervidil or anything to like soften my cervix. They just started the Pitocin. They would up it about 2 times every time they'd up it. So they'd up it to like 2, then 4, and it goes all the way up to 20. At about 11:50 a.m. my Pitocin was at a 12, and during this whole time, from when they started the Pitocin to now, I wasn't really feeling anything at all. I was just kind of laying there talking to everyone, hanging out, having visitors in and out of the room, and I wasn't feeling them at all. I could only feel them if I touched my belly, and my belly would get hard. And then a little bit after the 12, I kind of started to feel them. I could start to feel the tightening in my belly. I started feeling a little bit of back contractions or back labor and sharp pains in my belly and you know, down there, and I could feel like a sharp pain start down there, and it would work itself up my belly, and that's all I started feeling. And it wasn't too painful yet, but I was starting to feel them a little bit after they made the Pitocin to a 12. So at around 2 p.m. they had upped my Pitocin to a 14 already, and once they put the Pitocin to a 14, I could feel it like pretty strongly. I started feeling the contractions, definitely. I was having some back labor, and it was pretty painful. I could breathe through them, I could talk to them, but I do remember like getting teary-eyed at times, and I could still kind of like fake through them with people in the room, but I got to the point where like I wasn't even embarrassed anymore. Like I was just dying when I had the contractions. But during the breaks between the contractions, I was like, no, like I can still do this. And breathing through the contractions really did help, because I was just trying to focus on my breathing, and you had something else to think about, and before you know it, the contractions were over. But once they upped the Pitocin to a 14, I definitely did feel it. They set me up princess style again with the bed up, my legs crossed to try to help the baby to drop. I was a tight 2 centimeters by now, and I had a bulging water. So I was sitting there, and then eventually my water broke while I was sitting like that. And it took me a long time to get from 1 to 2 centimeters, but once I hit 2 centimeters and my water broke, things went very quickly. My water didn't break right at 2 p.m. because I was sitting there for a while before my water broke. So after my water broke, I called the nurse in, and she was like, yes, your water did break. How's your pain? And I was like, I still have this, like I'm fine. She's like, are you sure? I'm like, yes. And they wouldn't give me the epidural until I was 3 to 4 centimeters anyways, and I was like, I didn't want to get it too early and have it wear off when I was pushing, and so I was like, I'm just gonna wait this out a little bit longer. And so they left, and about 15 minutes later the pain started getting really intense shortly after my water broke. At first I thought I could do it, and then I was like, oh my gosh, and it was super painful, and I was getting back labor again. And they said when you have back labor, it's like the baby's face is that way or something, and it would like I had it and then I didn't, and then I had it again, and it was so painful. And then I really had to pee, and so I was calling the nurses to come help me pee since I had all the IVs and stuff. I needed help like getting in and out of bed, and my water broke, so I was like leaking a bunch of fluid. And oh, look at his little lip. And so then I called them and they were taking forever, and between like waiting for them to come, the pain got even worse. And I called them again because I had to pee and I was in so much pain. And when they came, I went to pee and I was on the toilet and I started getting a contraction and I was hurting so bad. So when I made it back to my bed, I was like, can I get something for the pain? And they're like, okay, how bad is your pain? I was like, I could cry. Like, I wasn't crying, I was holding it back, but I could cry. And so they gave me some medication, I believe it starts with a C, to help take the edge off. I didn't want it because I heard it can make you kind of like loopy and like out of it, but they only gave me the smallest dose to help make it more bearable while I waited for my epidural, because I did want the epidural. And because they have to give you a whole bag of fluid before you can get the epidural. So as soon as the pain starts getting even a little bit too intense, tell them that you want the epidural, otherwise you'll have to wait with super bad pain to get it. And so they started the bag of fluid, they gave me that medication, and during that time the pain was really bad. I kind of started nodding off between contractions and getting really sleepy and like wanting to fall asleep, and the pain was so bad that I was kind of out of it. And the next thing I know, the nurses were in there and she was flipping me side to side and made me get like doggy style on the bed, flipping me back and forth, and she gave me the oxygen and I had no idea what was going on. I was so out of it, I was just kind of like going along with it. And I later learned, like shortly after, but I later learned that it's because the baby's heart rate was dropping. I think he had a 7-minute or 10-minute, I don't remember, but he had a pretty decent decline in his heart rate. And I think she told me 15 minutes is considered long, but she said it was longer than she would have liked, and she thought we were gonna have to do a C-section, and I was like, oh, of course. And she was asking me if Gio was gonna go with me if I had a C-section, and I'm like, yes, he is, of course. And I was kind of bummed, but whatever was best for my baby, you know. And so, sorry honey. And so that happened, and they gave me the oxygen, and his heart rate would come up. And this is kind of a trend the rest of the time I was in labor. His heart would go down and it would come up, down, up, and they kept getting close to giving me a C-section but decided not to. The doctor was actually on his way to my room to give me a C-section, and the nurse went out there and told him, like, I think she's okay. My water broke at 2:55 actually, so, or around there. And I dilated from a 2 to a 7 in 1 hour. And after I dilated from that, I got the epidural at a 7. And after I got the epidural, I felt great and I couldn't feel the pain anymore. They were still flipping me like crazy because of the baby, and it was pretty scary. Everyone who saw it said that it was like really scary. It was really dramatic. They were like throwing me around. And with the epidural, it made it even harder because I was numb and I couldn't feel anything. So they had to help me turn, and when they would help me turn, it felt like I was on a roller coaster. Like, it was just crazy. And and the next time I updated, I remember saying it was like 6:23, and I told the vlog that I dilated from a 2 to a 7 in an hour. And this is where the times get kind of like foggy for me, because I did dilate that quickly in like an hour, but then after that I guess it kind of drug out a little bit longer, but I was still dilating pretty quickly in my opinion, because it felt like they're like, oh, you're 7, you're 8, okay, you're about to push. And I think what made everything longer was my epidural, because they said I should be feeling pressure, and we were supposed to start pushing at 7 to have baby, but we didn't start pushing till probably about 8, because they had to turn off the epidural so I could feel when to push, because I could feel no pressure at all. So they turned the epidural off, and it does kind of like go away pretty quickly. It still takes some time, but I'm sorry, but it definitely like wears off faster than you would think. So then we started to push, And when we were pushing, I really don't think that I was pushing very well. The doctor and the nurses were telling me that I was pushing fine. I think it was just to not like unmotivate me. And I guess I must have been pushing okay because we did have him pretty quickly. I want to say we had him out within like 20 minutes or so, but I'm not sure exactly when I started pushing. It wasn't that long, but it wasn't like super fast either. And I was pushing and pushing, and it was really hard to push for me. I still couldn't really feel it, and you would have to take a deep breath and like bear down and like pull your legs back and push for 10 seconds straight, no sound. And if I made any sound or started to scream or anything, they would make me stop and restart it. And you'd have to push during a contraction, and they'd want you to get about 3 sets of 10 seconds of pushing in. So that's like 30 seconds of not breathing, because when you're pushing you can't really breathe. And especially after the second push, I would start getting really lightheaded and wanting to throw up. And the doctor was like, that's okay, just throw up. If you start throwing up, that's some of the best pushes you'll ever get. And I'm just like, no, I don't want to throw up. And the third push of the 3 sets, I would really struggle and usually start making sounds at the end. And the baby was coming out, and I was kind of struggling though because the doctor had to use the vacuum on him, which it kind of looks like a toilet plunger, and they attach it to the baby's head and they pull the baby out as you push during the contractions. And he also gave me an episiotomy, which means he cut me to make more space for his head to come out. And when I would push and he started to come out, they put they would make me stop, like while I was pushing a couple times they had to make me stop, and they would just let his head like sit there, like my vagina's like open and his head's like barely poking out, and they would just let his head be there to try to stretch me open a little bit more so I wouldn't rip or tear. And that's when the doctor decided to cut me. And that whole time, like, I would push, and then like in the like middle, like during the breaks of the contractions, his head would just be like halfway out, and like it was really painful. I remember it was painful. I believe it was like a burning sensation, like the ring of fire, and it was not fun at all. And by the time I was pushing, the epidural had wore off a lot. It wasn't completely gone, but I could feel a whole lot, and it was so painful. And then my baby came out, and we finally had him. He did have a bit of a cone head because of the vacuum, and the nursery was there because his heart rate kept declining so much and for so long while I was giving birth. And after I had him, the doctor actually made a comment saying that his heart rate declined for like 5 minutes or so while I was pushing, like while the baby was in the birth canal, and that it scared him, and that he thought we were gonna have to do a C-section. And he like laughed it off, but I was like, oh my god, like the nurses and the doctor was able to stay so calm during all of this. And Gio did not get to cut the cord. The baby came out and they just snipped the cord, and they took him over where they weigh him, get him like wiped off and stuff, and they just checked him out. And then when the doctor was stitching me up, I couldn't really feel it at first. He was like, one perk of the epidural is like, you won't feel this. But by the end of the stitches, I could feel it. I could feel all of it, and it wasn't super painful, but it did hurt. And he kept saying that he was almost done, but he was not almost done. I swear he kept stitching me for what felt like forever. And then the baby, I got to see my baby. I have video clips of him actually being born and right after he was born, and I have photos of like, you know, everything. And I was shaking really bad because of like the pain and the medication and all the blood that I lost. But I finally got to hold him, and we got to do skin to skin for a little while. Then I got to try to breastfeed him, and he ate a little bit, but then they took him off and they took him to the nursery for about 2 hours, and he was born at 8:26 p.m., 7 pounds 11 ounces, 20 1/4 inch, and is how long he was. And I didn't get to see him again until like almost midnight. And but overall, our birth was pretty fast, I think, and it was pretty smooth despite the fact that he kept wanting his heart rate to drop and such. And it just really I don't know. I remembered the pain very vividly, like the week after birth, but once you're like healed more down there and everything, it is kind of hard to actually remember the pain like everyone says. You don't think it's possible, but it is so true. And the first week I was like, I think I'm one and done. Just adjusting to life with the baby and all the pain that came with it, I was like, no. And but now, since I kind of don't remember all of it, I am like, oh, I want another. But of course that won't happen for a long time because, you know, we're gonna get on birth control. But yeah, and I have like videos and a picture of him on me right after birth, but I didn't really get to see him or hold him because, like I said, I was kind of out of it and I wasn't really all there. And I think it's like your body's way, honestly, of helping you cope with the pain, because if I was all there, I think I would have like been freaking out. And they took him really quickly off of me. But that's how baby Micah was born. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and follow our Instagram for this account at RaisingBabyDiaz. It's the same name as our YouTube name, and we will see you in our next video. Bye guys.